Genesis 24, an exegetical and biblical-theological commentary. Today we're diving into Genesis chapter 24, an exegetical and biblical-theological commentary. 1. Introduction to the narrative context. Genesis 24 functions as a critical hinge within the progressive unfolding of the divine promise plan. It bridges the foundational promises given to Abraham with their necessary continuation in his heir Isaac. Within the broader biblical worldview, the overarching narrative of God's redemptive purpose is anchored to a specific historical covenant that guarantees a seed, a land, and a universal blessing. The patriarchal crisis presented here, the necessity of securing a proper bride for the child of promise, threatens the continuity of the covenantal line. By orchestrating the acquisition of Rebekah, Yahweh demonstrates his providential fidelity to the concrete promises made to ethnic Israel. This narrative serves to assure the reader that the divine counsel's purposes will not be thwarted by human mortality or geographic displacement. In this way, it preserves the holy seed through which the ultimate cosmic fulfillments of the promise plan will eventually be realized. 2. Exegesis of Genesis 24. A. The covenantal oath and mandate, verses 1 through 9. Abraham recognizes that the purity and continuity of the promise plan require deliberate action. He binds his servant with a solemn oath to acquire a wife for Isaac from his own kindred, expressly forbidding intermarriage with the local Canaanite population. Abraham explicitly commands his servant not to allow Isaac to settle in the land of his relatives, despite the concentration of his kin residing there. For an individual who had spent his entire life as a sojourner in a foreign, albeit promised, land, returning to a place of shared familial roots and values would have been a highly attractive prospect. However, permitting Isaac to leave Canaan would have abandoned the geographical component of the promise plan. Thus, Abraham insists that Isaac remain in the land of promise while the bride is brought to him. B. The providential journey and the divine sign, verses 10 through 49. The servant's expedition to Aram Naharaim is marked by a deep reliance on Yahweh's covenant loyalty, hesed. He prays for a highly specific sign at the well, effectively placing the success of the mission directly into the hands of God's providence. The alacrity with which the servant's prayer is answered highlights the divine backing of this mission. Later rabbinic traditions, reflecting on the rapid nature of the servant's journey as depicted in Genesis 24, verse 42, assert that he completed the trip in a single day. This tradition categorizes the event as a demonstration of kefitzat, a miraculous shortening of the way, underscoring the supernatural urgency to secure the covenantal line. See the betrothal and the preservation of the line, verses 50 through 67. Upon recognizing Yahweh's hand in the matter, Rebekah's family consents to the union. Rebekah exercises her own agency, agreeing to leave her family immediately, an action that strongly parallels Abraham's original departure from his homeland in Genesis chapter 12. She is brought into the tent of Sarah, and her union with Isaac comforts the patriarch, effectively passing the matriarchal mantle and ensuring the promise plan proceeds to the next generation. 3. New Testament Appropriations. The New Testament writers organically connect the historical preservation of Isaac's line in Genesis 24 to the ultimate fulfillment of God's redemptive plan in the Messiah. They recognize that the physical continuity of the patriarchs was a necessary precursor to global blessing. In Matthew chapter 1, verse 2, the gospel writer explicitly roots the genealogy of Jesus the Messiah in the successful continuation of the Abrahamic line through Isaac, demonstrating the historical outworking of God's promise plan initiated in Genesis. In Galatians chapter 4, verse 28, the Apostle Paul draws upon the unique theological status of Isaac as the child of promise, illustrating that the spiritual realities experienced by believers are inextricably linked to the historical preservation of the covenant line. And in Romans chapter 9, verses 7 through 8, Paul emphasizes that the physical continuation of the covenant line, secured through the events of Genesis 24, serves as the foundational matrix for understanding the nature of God's election and the ongoing validity of his promises. 4. Theological synthesis. Viewed through the lens of promise plan theology, Genesis 24 is far more than an ancient Near Eastern marriage narrative. It is a vital mechanism in the organic unfolding of God's redemptive purposes. The deliberate choice to secure a bride from Abraham's kin while strictly prohibiting Isaac's departure from Canaan underscores a profound fidelity to the concrete, historical promises given to ethnic Israel. These physical realities, the preservation of the promised seed and the occupation of the specific land, do not dissolve into mere spiritual metaphors. They maintain their original localized validity within the overarching canonical narrative. Simultaneously, they point forward to the cosmic fulfillment of the promise plan, wherein the singular seed of Isaac would ultimately become the mechanism of universal blessing, seamlessly uniting the physical history of the patriarchs with the eschatological consummation of the kingdom of God.